in Shenzhen, it's quite accepted to go down and do custom injection molding or make custom circuit boards. So the end result is that makers' projects are really drawing on the skills of a whole lot of different people. They are so embedded within this ecosystem of designing and manufacturing that someone's hobby project can look as good as a finished retail product.
So visiting Seed Studios, they had a kind of really large development team, but we were also able to go see their xFactory facility, which is kind of like Makerspace on steroids.
Which was a really, really interesting experience.
That was a pretty good day.
xFactory is a makerspace with the support of Seed and the Chinese government behind it.
xFactory is a new makerspace by Chaihuo Makerspace,
which is a very well fitted out makerspace, to the likes that we only dream of here.
CCHS is an awesome space, but it's very small compared to what xFactory was.
There are also programs and lecture series and all sorts of assistance to help people turn their ideas into product.
It's brand new. It opened only in early 2017.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing we should be aiming for in Melbourne.
It's in a very new region of Shenzhen. Buildings are all still going up, but it's going to be huge. It's the Internet of Things region. They've actually defined a space for the Internet of Things.
So where you can actually go and do your own prototype, which I find it really, really cool.
And this xFactory is right in the middle of this. Yeah, it's right in the middle of this Internet of Things district is a makerspace. So it's going to dovetail beautifully, and when people start coming up with, here's the electronics, and I need an enclosure or a housing or space to make some stuff, it's right there, right next to everything.
It's a beautiful space.
So the xFactory was pretty much solely focused on makers, and especially a lot of the whole pro maker movement is having access to the more professional machines. Like they have their lathes and mills and CNC machines there, not just for metalworking but woodworking as well.
They had, you know, production quality like CNC machines, the pick and place machines.
They also had 3D printers, things like that there.
And it was kind of like a co-working space, like you paid a subscription and you got to use the facility in the areas, and you could really see there were like young entrepreneurs from the West and locals using the space. So it was kind of pitched as, you know, you could use this as a bit of a landing pad to kind of start to understand what manufacturing was in China and have kind of a home base. So I think if you're going to spend a couple of months making something, like basing yourself out of here is incredibly valuable. You could reasonably go there and understand what manufacturing is.
But the idea of, if I'm over in Shenzhen for some other work, sending some material over and having a tinker with it, that's an amazing idea.
So one of the most impressive things about Seed Studios xFactory was it wasn't just a room full of equipment, but the layout and the sort of the creative nature and the aesthetic of the place.
The xFactory was perhaps one of the more creative spaces we went into. Not everything there was about high volume product, but it was about tinkering. Yeah, we even saw some of the make fashions, so electronic fashions. Great to see that kind of creativity being fostered and appreciated within the xFactory space.
When you're designing a makerspace, and certainly we have gone through this design process at Fab 9, it's actually quite difficult to anticipate how members will use a space.
So when we were at the Makers Fair, we heard from one of the founders who was talking about the Makers movement, and one of the core values of the Makers movement is this kind of idea of open source. This idea that you should be able to share your technology because together we make it great. And I think part of the design at xFactory was to maintain this openness.
The xFactory was stunning. I mean, architecturally beautiful.
Large spaces, very visually appealing.
Full of every machine you'd ever want to touch to fabricate something. Again, people who knew how to use them, and a really vibrant co-working space.
It was in a building where it was like it was a roadway, and we were down underneath that roadway, and so there's this large sort of rocky area that was outside area. There was makers sort of cutting up wood and doing all the messy stuff, and then indoors that there was these sort of creative areas. So there was neon signs, and there was xFactory spelled out with coloured lights, and there was displays, and there was this desk that had been, I think it had taken them several weeks to make, where it was basically CNC sections to make this sort of beautiful sculpture, and so it was a very creative, artistic, inspiring area.
Because it really reinforced this idea that, you know, the place you are inspires you.
xFactory is designed to be collaborative.
So it doesn't look like a prototype or electronics or manufacturing place.
And just seeing on the walls and on the ceiling and things like that, things that the makers had built, it gives you a really good idea of the sort of things you can do in the xFactory.
With lots of assistance given to people to help bring their product to market. We could certainly do with a lot more of these in Australia.
So a lot of the maker spaces we'd visited before had been more, and the factories had been much more utilitarian. So they were kind of, the previous maker spaces had been functional. They had everything set out in the place where it should be. Like, you know, they used the system where they put like sticky tape on the ground, and they said, you know, this is the spot for the bin, this is the spot for the CNC machine, which was all, you know, very functional. Whereas kind of went to the next level. They really embraced the kind of concrete jungle in which they were in. A lot of it was kind of concreted, but then it was, you know, done in, you know, big towering sections. So you got this kind of sense of awe. You'd have like a bamboo forest on one side and a concrete wall on the other, and it was just like a long corridor with wood down the bottom, and you could have kind of stood there, and it was gorgeous. You felt like creating something. So they really paid homage to their, you know, their maker roots in their physical environment, which was really, it made you want to stay there.
Yes, the creative space in the xFactory definitely helps inspire you to build something, because you go there and you have these ideas and you can work with other makers there, and it's really helpful, and just having access to those machines as well.
xFactory, they've kept some of the rooms empty, well, in the sense that they didn't have machineries in them. It's more suitable for smaller items like fashion or electronics. I would say they're multi-purpose rooms that can be utilized however the members would like them to be utilized. They have two main workshops. One is a timber shop, and one is actually kind of metalworking and laser cutters.
And then there is a metal shop where the CNC machine, small scale, and there's electrical space, and there is actually collaborative space.
The hard noise equipment was in these separate rooms, and so you get the sense that you could have people making things with the noisy, messy equipment at the same time people who are designing and doing creative stuff in the adjacent rooms, and so people collaborating and working together with these, doing these different roles.
And it means you can go and you can help someone, or you can be inspired by people doing some interesting projects just next door.
When you design a makerspace, sometimes you encounter this issue of how do you make machines safe. So there needs to be a physical separation, and this is more for health and safety reasons. So you have different levels of access. You don't want a little kid to be running into dangerous machineries.
You had to kind of maintain separation for safety reasons and for functionality, but they wanted to make this space feel inclusive, so all the walls were glass.
Windows connecting spaces rather than walls.
In xFactory, they have a big window where you can see machines in action, and it's quite important because humans learn from mimicking other people by looking at how other people do things, right? So the example that I use is that a lot of people learn how to cook from looking at how their mom or dad cook.
Group of people working on different projects in there, and you can sort of see what's going on by a glance around the room, which extends beyond the room that you're in because of the glass.
I felt it was really deliberately done, but it kind of made you feel included in this space.
It is a very inspiring space, and it's a much more inviting place. I think we need to make those spaces be inviting to women, just people of all creeds, yeah.
And it is really the incredible one-stop makerspace. You've got everything you could need there.
Very accessible, it's membership based.
People who come and stay there and do their prototype, and it costs about 600 RMB per month to be a member with xFactory.
It is quite important to have that kind of space for people. I think they are more catering towards pro makers. I think you have to apply actually to be accepted to be a member. But yeah, it's definitely a great space for makers to interact with other makers and to make your products and prototypes.
The xFactory at Seed was definitely the best makerspace I've seen.